아드 샴리아 가장기 최 디바 샤베 고디 샤이.
So next we will continue from yesterday, and I will talk about the subject of confessing misdeeds.
제가 넘버 수인지 먹고도 제베 또네. 나르제게 되발은 교바 차고기는 나르기 유기 쟁하라 퇴샤 제보 대 지들은 제버 자샤나 교바기로 넘버 순 대매버달라 교바게바다 지버달라 교바게바다 뉴도 제고 버달라 교바게바 달라 당보니 다그체베 디버디야 랭가 잔디위체도체 랭가 녀냥위체도체 랭가 류네위체도체 랭가 제사베체도체 다시네 지denkim gechen digbeche radanyena yudan ludan norze nam dada midrobar lengengi didinam dada ron kando yebader semra damba yino tedrayam kimda beijing yuben dole pama bünde buda chumada chena no da sala sona yi chiweje tedan roami lenam jesu da tedan ro sheda shidu dongye gyobade yuso buda chuma gyosu gyumai dani jibi dongye nywayo 대다디제 다게 게임에 셰송소 준줄레게 탑제 버드 체가 나가 되더 마시는 자담들 디번나 번노도 자와나 게임에 김전나 게임에 다게 메버 교와데 대신 탑제 메버 주 셰송소 해나 디번에 자니니다 류롱조니데 디시체도 제발라 대시다 다 윤도 로소 메베나 디번이 칙체라 된송으로는 교바 잡고 게도 가데 되메 메야 디달라 네버 만규 민규루냐나 변이와 디벤드부디 지버다는 겨버자데 디바체바데 치치게 전지보다 시외제 지보다 시외원은 지보다 소모다라 당번에 디바지는 시계 뒤져야 내실에서 보통에 미세번용의 지게도 다는 많은 도시는 녀녀신은 기다고야 소주바에서 더니 지빈요를 시에송소 되는 치외진 지분지원에 시지기부 신지 번역기부 나무 머rum바 샤바토베는 군의 진시 야외내서 티 유보다 샤란라서 천자 토바는 게 친이 제데 네바토만 좀 되더라 신지번이 있으면 얘기 집에 시집에 그래서 사람지잖아 대하다가 마대소 마대도 제송소 룹진레야 뒤이샤베 깨네 다들 신지면 또 보는 유변다신 티브린 주시해서 신지번이라 다 미지소냐라 지게도 기부 연락체에서 드린 체브레 체방 전주데 카감미장이라서 알레시는 유나나 신지번년 진지디 세수쟁기서 지진내기 되비요바 라도냥다 뮤직을 셰송소 셰송소다.
The power of the thorough application of total remorse is to disclose sincerely and with ardent regret in the presence of the refuges wrongs done in the past. How to stimulate remorse? There are three ways: by considering the pointlessness of those wrongs, by considering fear, and by considering the urgent need for purification. Remorse by considering their pointlessness is engendered by reflecting, I have committed wrongs sometimes to subdue my enemies, sometimes to protect my friends, sometimes for the sustenance of my own body, and sometimes to accumulate material wealth. However, when I die and the time comes to move on to another life, my enemies and friends, my country and my body, my wealth and possessions will not accompany me. Yet I shall be shadowed by the wrongs and obscurations created by my harmful actions. No matter where I am reborn, these will rise up as my executioners. This is why the questions of the layman Viradatta Sutra says, father, mother, brothers, sisters, spouse, servants, wealth, and acquaintances cannot accompany those who die, but their actions do follow and trail after them. It also says, when great suffering comes, children and spouse offer no refuge. You experience the agony alone; they cannot share your lot. The way of the Bodhisattva says, I must leave all behind and go, but that I have not recognized. For the sake of those I like and dislike, I have done various misdeeds. Those I dislike will cease to be, and those I like will cease to be. I myself will cease to be, and everyone will cease to be. Thus we have committed wrongs for the sake of those four: friends, enemies, our body, and possessions. Those four will not accompany us for very long. Yet on their account we have committed wrongs that will bring much trouble and little benefit. Contemplating the reality of this, great remorse will arise. There are those who think that even if wrong actions are of little benefit, they will not really bring harm to their doer. They should contemplate the second point, remorse by considering fear. Reflecting the consequence of wrong as fear, remorse will arise. Wrong actions result in the three main times of fear: fear prior to death, fear when actually dying, and fear after death. Fear prior to death. Those who have committed wrongs will experience unbearable sufferings, feeling struck to their very marrow, and so forth. It is said, "While I am lying on my bed surrounded by all my relatives, I alone will experience the feeling of my life being cut." At the time of actual death, the result of wrongdoing is fear. The wrongdoer experiences the henchmen of the Lord of Death, black and horrible beings brandishing lassos, coming to place their lassos around his neck so as to lead him off to hell. Later, others bearing sticks, swords, and all sorts of weapons torture and torment in many different ways. Seized by the messengers of Yama, what good are friends, what good are kin? Merit alone will guard me then, but that alone I have not done. The letter to a student says, "Having locked time's noose around our necks, Yama's ferocious henchmen prod us with sticks and drag us along." A person who thinks, "I shan't be afraid of Yama's henchmen," should reflect as follows. A person being led today to the place where his limbs will be chopped off looks different than before, his mouth dried out, the veins in his eyes bulging. What need to say how miserable I'll be when seized by Yama's henchmen, so physically terrifying and stricken by horrifying pain. There will also be the fear beyond death as a consequence, and stricken by horrifying pain.
다들 디버샤워들이야. 다 톱시 상에 관해 디버셔즈 디버셔로 되지 나 톱시 상에 관해 디버셔즈 송이 말해.
So here, in teaching the way of confessing misdeeds, it speaks about how we need to confess misdeeds with all of the four powers.
다들 디버샤워들이야. 샤가 디버디 디버 컨드지 샤가 여르슬라비나 디버 탐제 디버 탐제 단도나지 디버를 레자마이바 고 통마메바네마 사샤베기 디버 탐제 샤고야 쳐여르스.
Now, what misdeeds must we confess? We need to confess all of our misdeeds, not just one or two, but all of the misdeeds we have committed since and accumulated since beginningless samsara.
가라사랑 아주 다지 코아 통모메바네 디베 공부를 좀 코르니 사마라 다지 디버 망고치 사야래 베네지 세터리리아 미제가 다지 가르래 나 아주 망고치게 넘기 디버 샤스도 사네 에네 다지 첸딜라 지 디버 가라사야 미세데 아지 녀외 차르스 머베 규주 튼튼지 나를 디버 가르사야 딜려야지 아주 교샤샤 용대 알아 다 예배네 아주지 개왕하지 이제 용계지 근데 셰비미나 아니 세라고 통마메바네 사베다지 디버 망부시 사체 예배 인두사네 되게 상월로 샤고야 돼 개좀 차대 알았어.
And the reason for that is that we carry the burden of all of the misdeeds we've done through from beginningless samsara, which are as large as Mount Meru. That means that there are a great number of misdeeds we must confess. It's not just this life. We normally, when we confess misdeeds, we think about confessing misdeeds in this life or in the recent past. We think about the misdeeds that we've done in a short time, and we feel regret for these misdeeds. But as people who believe in past and future lives, we must recognize that it's not just the misdeeds of this life, but it's the misdeeds of beginningless lifetimes. And so there a great number of misdeeds, and we must confess all of them.
미가 시지 밴드레 용디도 지수수에게 에너지 챈딜리아 다 디버를 사지 다 가르쳐지 수수에게 다 디버첨을 som마로 다지 디버를 사 되는 셰브 때네 에너지 배 땅에 디버들이 사수 삼바체 이 공도 취니 선나다로 이 양에게 뇌네 다 디오는 라마도비 다 되게 다 가르쳐 강해를 시다 디버티에 올 냄데비서지 다 디오로 이베 양에게 뇌네 땅에 조마서 다 살송 삼바르지 드리지게 다 이 공도 취니 되야지 용디 하래 다 이내야 다 드리지 이 양에게 뇌 공도 취니 되베 평가하면 대양 아주 삼로지 땅베이나 챈들이야 아주 디번 디단 디스체제 가르쳐다지 문진 비지 천시 문진야 예데비지다 모시야 예데바티 오늘 저녁에 다지 초진 시합이나 야부시다 차리요 야부시라서나 다 딱한다 지 야부시라래 가르상 아주 새롭고 통만 매번에 다지 디베 폼보다 르좀 쌓여지 디버 간데지 쌓여 아주 여기 무슨투야 매버다 무슨투야 말 계시 아주 지 새로운마도 줄이야 디버 자완이네 싸매버지 베지 민들 딱 까르부 까르기하는 비치지 레이나 에는 센딜 디버를 싸비는 되기다지 다다 빼사서 삼버지 되지 가르쳐다지 셈 냥에 뇌나 뇌도 루어도 지대데 이면 되지 차야만 아란소 당번에 빼사사 버지 딱 한다 디버 망보지 사사 버지 민들사네 다지 센딜이야 되지 디번 디던 디체어냐 버지 징 모시 하과를 예디 다 오늘 람주 주번을 버지려 진체제 아니 소소기 샤바체 텔라바지 샤종체네 딱 한다 주 소소기 셈데다지 디베가 초아를 되디 다지 카체도 버지 근데 지기 간다 탑시를 땅바디 계속시라래 섬정기
So some people think to themselves, "Oh, I've done wrongs in this life." Or they might think I've done some horrible wrong in this life. Then they feel like I'm wicked, I'm evil, and they feel depressed. They are overwhelmed by this. They're depressed and overwhelmed, and they feel like they're not able to get themselves out from under the wrongs that they have done. They feel like they are oppressed by the wrongs, by these wrongs. They think to themselves, "Oh, it's never going to work out for me. I'm finished. There's nothing I can do," and they get depressed. But actually, if we think about it, getting depressed in this way is not beneficial. If we really think about it in this life, we may be able to identify and recognize I've done this wrong and that wrong. We can recognize the different wrongs that we've done in this lifetime, and from one perspective, actually, this is very good. This is actually wonderful. And the reason it's wonderful is that from beginningless samsara, we've done misdeeds, so many misdeeds that they're larger than Mount Meru. And we cannot even identify a single one of these misdeeds. We do not know them. We don't know what we've done in other lifetimes. And so if we are someone who in past lives has only done positive actions, then it would be reasonable to say, "Oh, in this lifetime I've done something wrong, I'm finished, it's terrible." It would be reasonable to regret it. But actually, from the very beginning, from the previous lifetimes, we've already been finished. We've done so many misdeeds that there's no hope for us. And so if we think about it in this way, when we recognize that the misdeeds that we have done in this life, we understand that they've been misdeeds in this lifetime, then actually this is turning out very well. It's very good because we recognize them when we can confess them. And through confessing them, then we can feel in our mind it's like we can separate our mind from the feeling of being wicked or being evil. And so, for that reason, it is important for us to use the methods to confess misdeeds.
다대양 다제 디바 넘버 나서 제비 다데데 디바 대사 유엄 근론디 단 요모 도숨 개왕게 가서지 사 자디와래 제자다 도숨스르잔 되자샤 디모스 다대양 디모스아데 류라 류이왕 비켜여버나 신기 다 디모스아데 다 간다지 탐제리 캠리여비 유산에 디균제 된다 디모데다 예보도 리송가 예보도 되네 차방니부디 지금 아주 레사요 유산에 버지 차방니부 컨로라 마덴바 미시부터 차디 알았어 리송가 알았어 제산 디균제 되네 차방니부디 롬보도 리송가 알았다 도나 다지 규어 근론 녀모 도송 강롱기 군들랑바 가져다 녀모 도송 강롱기 거네 사베기 달래 탐지 자 디고 탐지 샤고 샤고
Now, we've done various different misdeeds, and when we think about the motivation for accumulating the misdeeds, or the cause for accumulating the misdeeds, the cause is the three poisons of the afflictions. And so it is because of those that we have committed the karmas. And so the three poisons of the afflictions are greed, hatred, and delusion. So delusion is includes them all. It's just as the body sense pervades the whole body, and similarly, delusion pervades all of the afflictions, and so it is like the king or like the boss. Greed and hatred, on the other hand, are when we actually commit actions. When we commit negative actions, then they are committed under the power of either one of these, greed or greed or aversion, and so they are like the ministers or the henchmen. And so the cause or the motivation is any one of these three poisons, the afflictions. They're the motivation. It is because of the three poisons that we accumulate the misdeeds. And so therefore, we need to confess all the acts we've done from the three poisons. We need to confess all of our misdeeds.
상주에 나로네 류당아다 대신 양 송아데다 데이브레
Now, what we use to accumulate the misdeeds, or the method of accumulating misdeeds, or the tool with which we accumulate misdeeds, the tools are our body, speech, and mind. So with any one of these that we accumulate misdeeds. And so for this reason, it says in the Prayer for Noble Aspiration for Excellent Conduct that we confess the misdeeds we've done with body, speech, and mind.
다 근데 디버스로 되네야 다지 정신들이 야와 베너지 랑게 응을수 자와를 쇼니 사 랑게 체바다 되네 랑이야 가져야 양 가시 랑이 디버는 점그 디버는 점그에 춘우제는 미션이야 체도 주가 다데 디버 체요 알았어 가라사나 소소의 디버체 미신달라 디버체 제주제 이 디버체 알았어 송수들이 알아 다가는 신기 에너지 신기 디버체발라 제수 이랑 다들 요아로든지 요디 요아
Also, in terms of the manner in which we accumulate misdeeds, we can talk about the different types. There are those that we have actually done ourselves, that we've actually committed and accumulated ourselves. And then there are those that we ourselves do not do. It's as if we were pretending to refrain from a misdeed, and yet we get someone else to do the misdeed on our behalf. And this is said to actually be a greater misdeed, because not only is it a misdeed for ourselves, but we are also getting someone else or making someone else perform a misdeed. And also there are the misdeeds that come when we rejoice when someone else commits a misdeed. And so these are different types of wrongs.
다노나 지 디과 가셰 지 운규르츠도 예다바 이나 나드네 디과 폐셔야데 지 방해기 주도 예다바 섬르베다지 경험도 바사샤베 디버들 방해 주도 예다바 다 망치에 되지 방해 주도 예다바 발라샤 주도 예다바 네면로 드제 온디 야레 아니 페나 차샤비나 아주지 체도를 디과 사바데 지 체메라바 제네 근데 막 외운디 가봐 수수이다 베 슝슝걸이야지 디버를 사셔는데 아주 드다 가시 챙겨 봐 가시 겐기 왕기 아주지 야 템버를 된데 마도 좀 윤시다 챙임도 제가 디균셀 때나다 개왕 아마 파샤네 지 체도의 디버냐 챙기 매매 인주사네 디균셀 때는 아주 샤고 체외 걸이야 쇼유디 이제 다지 가르로다지 상계의 전주사바 다지 이식이 전화된 서머보다 뒤주 군주인도 샤시 가르죠 나는 용아주 지서와 방도 교바 세마르 교바스 제가 다 간다 상계의 전주사바 오늘 저녁에 다 가르로지 방법 좀 맞선다 베너지 기디 방법 베 약셔로 직제 아니 세마르 교베게 딱 간사로 도차리에 인주사네 뒤주 군주인의 샤과체제 땅 아랑게네 에너지 지 코아 토마 매반 다달 투게 봐 디바 가르쳐 상황 수수 되는 거 말아 봐. 다 이면이야. 상계의 신주선바 이식 이제나 되면 남기 아니 투기 다 공발해야 돼. 추바. 다 공발랑 나와서는 다도 다 간다. 디 캔디에 인두사네. 다 코란주기다. 간다 네 디바 세 토마 매반 다달 투게 봐. 디바 가지 시합다 코란주 공부 넣으시 때 상물로 다지 샤과치기 인사마로지. 다 들으지기 아주 지금 시유스 세트업네 들으지 딱 간다 상계도 진주서 방법을 샤과 좀 전지 딱 미세지 차 들으지 어디도 와
And so basically, with the misdeeds we've committed, there are some that are visible, and then there are those that are latent. In fact, there are more that are latent, probably. There are all the misdeeds we have accumulated in previous lives. Those are latent. We don't remember them, and so they are latent. And the ones that are latent are probably more numerous than those that are visible. Like, for example, if we think about it, there are misdeeds that we did in the early part of our life, in the first part of our life, like the wrongs we did when we were little. And many of these we don't remember. Unless there's some particular circumstance, we don't generally remember all the wrongs that we've done. And so we not even thinking about previous lives, we don't even remember all the misdeeds we've accumulated in the first part of this life. And so for that reason, when we are making the confession, we make as the recipients or the recipients of the confession, or the people in front of whom we are making the confession, we have the Buddhas and the Bodhisattvas, those who have the eye of wisdom. We make them the recipients of our confession, and as is said, we make them the witnesses. They are the witnesses, they are the authorities. And so the reason is because they are the best witnesses, the best authorities about the misdeeds and the virtues and misdeeds that we have done. We do not remember all of them, all of the misdeeds we have done, but we make them the witnesses and the authorities, and in their presence we make the confession. We say to ourselves, I do not remember all of the misdeeds that I have done in previous lives, but you Buddhas and Bodhisattvas who have the eye of wisdom, you can comprehend that, you can understand, you can know all of this. And since you know all of the misdeeds that I have done since beginningless time, I confess all of them in your presence. And so in this way, the object or the recipient of our confession, as the object of our confession, we visualize all the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas as the witnesses. That is one reason for visualizing them.
다들 semje 탐제기 다 딕집 탐제 랑 띵도 랑네 섬으로 다지 semje 탐제기 디버사샤고 되게 되지 랑을 다지 류도 선한다도 랑기 줄이 랑체 디버샤다 다나 이제 랑기 교회 자와 지사와 탐제 semje 탐제기 딕집 정의 체도 뭐와 체바다 되는 다나 신기 semje 탐제 다지 상기 공파 알라는 메바 토야 디체도 디버정하게 딱 가더지 미버치하다 삼동하로 든지 셰비미나 디버 가르쳐 장독 채웠으나도 다 간다지 디번 닥독 채워도 좋은데 요데스
Now also, if we imagine that we take all of the misdeeds that all sentient beings have committed and we take them upon ourselves, it's like we take them upon our own body. We take all the misdeeds and obscurations of other sentient beings, we take them upon our being and upon our bodies. And then we also imagine that we are dedicating all of the virtues that we have done so that all sentient beings' misdeeds and obscurations can be purified. Likewise, we can imagine that we are purifying our misdeeds so that all sentient beings may be able to achieve the state of Buddhahood. If we do these, then our confession of misdeeds will have the greater power to purify or the greater power to cleanse our misdeeds.
다 가르쳐야 되네 다 또없이 참여권 디버샤디 미세가 다 가르쳐야지 지단계 가르쳐야 변하지 강바르지 강발래야 가와다 두마 다지 가와다 두마 집은 이나 안지 강바디 베지 템버르지랑 강바디 다 가르쳐야지 사덴르 비쳐여 인산 되는 신게 안지 디버디 가르쳐야지 또 시고네 니동 탐제 가르쳐야 간다르 수수수술이야 바지 가르쳐야 니동 가르치 사여버디 아니 수수수베디 샘르 템버체제 대다로 수수수기 냠보 댄세 이제 거네 아니 샤고체베입니다 아니지 가르쳐야
So we should confess our misdeeds with all four of the powers. It's like if you have a house. If the house is built with beams and pillars, then it'll be stable. It'll be like the ground or the earth. Similarly, if we any misdeed that we confess and purify with the four powers, any misdeed or downfall or wrong that we have done, if we recall them and then apply the appropriate antidote and then confess them with the four powers, then that is more potent.
또시 나는 양 다 개치슈디 에네 가수래 다지 당겨 또시 나는 양 개치슈디 가수래다 나르젤이야 지금 겨바당 친제라야 dom심 계약 다 저기 삼 다디 또 데니부디 다지 개치슈 비차디요.
Now, among the four powers, the most important ones are the remorse for the misdeeds we have done in the past and the resolve never to do them again. These are the two powers that are the most important.
ngarchen gyoba kya timilya ane number sunjin be tops sungdwa da nyebar thongwa cheche teba sunjin ni kaso ja top telya number sunjin be tops da chinche nyeba de larya mije ya ke dat lege chi kaso istemya tamja sha de nyeba lar tops cheche da de nibo de top shi na ne ya top nibo de gechi cha de yes 배낭 아주기 둠숭기 샥바르 비트니 제베qabla 라마 도지 집에 어훌라 가서 라마 도지 집에 사진 돼요 봐 다디 둠숭기 네바 샤주 제베qabla 타마텔리아 통돔 레숨 제하죠 통돔세도 산주 네발에 네버 통함 라지 통라사지 진짜 리버 도맘 어디산 도모사지 여봐 다 통돔 데 레숨 지과 금제노데 카레사나 다 더 공도 쉬변한 신기 나버 순진 몇 도대다 네발라 라르도 또 니부티 다 개점 싶 차리 인자 디균zel 때네 아주 동숭 샤바 체베 겁리야 안 담아들이야 통돔 렌숨 네발라 네버 통함사 되다 아니 진제 리버 domam사 돼 렌숨 기발도 적어야 김zen도디 드리지입니다
And so the regret for the misdeeds we've done in the past is called the power of remorse. And this is seeing the wrongs we have done as being wrongs. This is the power of, and then and so this is the power of remorse. The second power is the power of the resolve never to commit them again, the resolve to turn away from wrong. So these two are the most important of these. These two are the most important of the four powers. It's like when we do the purification and confession of the three vows. There's a ritual that begins Lama Vajra holder, think of me, and at the end it ends with what we call seeing and vowing. So we repeat that, seeing and vowing 3 times. What that means is that at the end you are asked, do you see that wrong as being a wrong? And then you are asked, do you resolve to refrain from that from now on? You are asked each of these 3 times. You're asked 3 times, do you see that as a fault? And you reply 3 times. Then you are asked 3 times, do you vow to resolve from it again? You do this 3 times. So the reason for doing this is that it's the same. It's because the remorse for past actions and the resolve to never commit them again are the most important of the 4 vows, the 4 powers. And so for that reason, when we are purifying the 3 vows, then at the end of this, we are asked the three times, do we see the wrongs as being wrongs? And we are asked, do you vow to refrain from them again? Do you see the wrongs as being wrongs?
다 년복군도 제베 다또 시나네 다 공도 쉬베게 또 대니부 다 년복군도 가자데 넘버 수지베 또다 년발라라도 또 니부디 또 시나네 대니 개체레 다 대니나네 가르 개체레서나 전에 넘버 수지베 또데 개체에 숨겨와라 가르레서나 넘버 수지베 또데 단 교심지레 디발은 교베세 교수면은 동심 끼고 말해서 동심 끼고 말와 근데 인도스탄에 다 동심 끼와 교심 끼와라 되봐 라류 인도스탄에 다 넘버 수집에 또데 캐치업 차리 와래 넘버 수집에 또와 교심 끼서나 동심 거라 다 끼알래라 그렇지 다 교심도 동심 이버데 끼서나 다 신다 또 신다지도 정신기다 갈리갈 랑갱강기 sommer 다 랑갱강게 비슷한 저도 다 간다지 레라버치네 요아지 유빈 주산 디균살 때네 넘버 수인집에 톱디 톱다 넘버 수인집에 톱스네 야디 칙디 착보를 도와 단 도는 교심디 랩단 교심디 개시주를 자리 유스라요
And so among those four powers, as I said before, these two, the powers of remorse and the power of turning away from it in the future, are the most important. And so why is it that these are the most, but among these two, which is the most important? It is the power of remorse. And the reason for that is that remorse means regret for your misdeeds. If you do not regret your misdeeds, then you will not develop the resolve to never do them again. And so the resolve never to do them again depends upon the regret. And so for that reason, the regret or the power of remorse is very important. If you have this regret, then it will be easier for you to make the resolve never to do the misdeeds again. And so therefore, among these two, the power of remorse and the power of regret, if you have the power of the remorse, then it's just naturally, automatically, it'll be very easy to develop the resolve never to do them again. And so when you say the power of remorse is maybe a less common word, but you can say regret. It's the most important to feel that regret.
다 교바 되려야 에너지 교바 길로 되려야 나바 숨제 다다 타게 나로라야 안 되매바 삼네 교바게야 랑게 가 제베 디바데서 된다 민도스다데 디바체발 된다 민도 초 민도 삼바로 된지 삼바네 교바게야 지요라서 지게 지버타네스 안가 디바데 제발 때네 디벤 지부 다 이도 남이 이도 명화 다 간다 지기 다 세지만 예선숨세나 다도 다 간다 되게 남이 이도 명화 용거래 되네도 텔라다네 지 신앙사고래샤 디벤 지부디베 지수로와 임베지 되네지 삼마타세 교바게 지송래 다 되네 뉴르도 대고 버타네스 다 뉴르도 대고 버사 다 제리 용거 다 쇼모지
Now, and there are three ways to develop regret that are discussed in the Ornament of Precious Liberation. And so the first of these is thinking about how considering the pointlessness of these actions. It's to think there is no point, there's no meaning to these actions, and thinking about that reason, that reason feeling regret. The second is by considering the fear or the danger. That's by thinking about the result, the fearful, terrifying ripening of these wrongs that will come, like the rebirth in the three lower realms in the next lifetime. When we look at those, it is frightening, and so it is feeling the terror about this. The third is by considering the urgent need to purify oneself or to remove them from oneself. This will be discussed later, so there's not necessary to speak about it right yet.
다 공도 주변난 시기다 교바게바 딱 계좀 사려래 제자다 교바 길로대야 내가로디 아주 다 시징 나올래야 되네 강신은 제 밤에 교바다 치네 바다 된바 줄대야 나와 진제도 남세 대에서 이제 직시하래. 고물루르 제베 시징 나로냐. 다 뒤된다도 가르스나. 다제 원체 밤에 광도 규베 있네야. 치다 바다 됨을 규베 있미나. 다디 배디 안 다와 진다 제와 더부치. 다시 자루레스 제제 이제 송요래.
So as I was explaining before, regret is extremely important. And in terms of the manner of generating regret, it is said in the letter to a friend. Those who have previously been careless, if from now on they are careful, it is like the moon coming out from behind the clouds. So this is from the letter to a friend by Nagarjuna. And the meaning of it is that even if you have been careless in the past, in the future, if you are careful, then it is like the analogy of the moon coming out from behind the clouds.
다디 내가지 같은 거를 sana 아주지야 참섬 디버시드스다 수수지 오늘 디버를 제베 rani da dipa chimur chebe indusan tela tena nga susu ine da ngaran dipa chimur chi insan baru che mi shinda ke da ko dikjen re ko tamnyam re zaru ji mi nyeju ru che ani susu ke da rang ngaran da dikjen tamnyam da 가르에 야타르메 버스머 야드라메 교스머 버다 든데르지 인삼버지 수수수수 녀버지 미신다게 녀버지들이 용도 다이네 급들이야 샤과사디 아주지 심슈 파라지당 에네 가르에 자와게알 느지레샤 마도베 샤과체스두사네 가시 섬리나로 샤과체스두사 다tingene ji susu be nabu nagyano ji ba sueje ane be zana ji karweda be la member ji samta de ji mare de be de da dawa jinde de sumana si dawa nabu sueje syo mare da dawa de nege ji kora genge wang da jingi dimni ye indu sana da de jingi 간다라 집이 차대 봐 세샤 이미나 yang ko ji da wa jin de chawas da we we na cho tu ba ji ju de ya re a da de na xin ge da da ji su su gi ga shu da ji chawang yin ba se na da do ji de we le de chu yin du san lu bu du lu ru ge ji me ge de ji bi yin bi du san di yun zel de ne ani de gen tel de che da che kan da su su ka la khabar cha de ya re da yin bi ne 디베 소와다 디베기 내는 균이 샤과사야 고아로분들이 질랭가 다마시디 시라시라지 구주 시라유메 하고면 삼섭당에 샤과사야 샤세두상 아주 삼점이야 벽에 나올래야 베나 디지안지 소소시 체외도 나를 저러 디베 카샤베 된다 베나 지지 기준제 자라도 좀 샤샤비나 소소 체외도 나를 줘 제가 디규제 때네 수수기 에너지 심규되다 아니 디베게 가르지 디베드니 베스 가수소를 체지 수수비 디베베 소나디 디베 소나로 체지베 가두이네지 가수에다지 깔레 하버를 지가 아니 지고 차버를 체지 마데브시지 가다지 디베디 수수다 바 카체지 드리지가 토한다지 수수 미사버를 체야지 세나란도 간다지 자와 사버를 지게세 드리지기 다가 너무 고 사버를 주야 내 사바디 드리지리야네 의지로도 시게
So the main point here is that when we have done wrong, we think to ourselves, I've done something wrong, and then we'll think to ourselves, I'm bad, I'm evil, I'm a bad person. Other people will say they're a bad person, they're guilty, they're a bad person. And say that it's the person that is wrong, the person that is bad. And then we ourselves say, I'm bad, I'm wicked, I'm evil. There's no hope for me, there's no way out for me. And so then we feel guilty, guilty for ourselves, and we think of ourselves as being wrong and guilty. But here the point about confessing is it's not to make ourselves feel guilty. Instead, it's to increase our inspiration. It's to increase our hope. To confess here means that we are trying to eliminate those. It doesn't mean that we're making everything pitch black for ourselves and that there's no way that we can find our way out. Instead, it's like the moon that is free of the clouds. The moon itself never went black. It's just that because of temporary conditions, it was hidden by the clouds. But if the clouds are removed, then the moon itself becomes visible. And so, in the same way, no matter when we have done bad things, then it is as if we are obscured by temporary adventitious obscurations, but this is because of various conditions. Because of that, it's like we cannot shine forth. But when we have this feeling of having done wrong, then actually the way I think about confessing, and I'm not sure if this is the right way to think about it or not, but when we talk about confessing in Tibetan, the word for confessing, shakpa, actually means to cut off. So it's like we've got a knife and we're slicing away, cutting off the bad parts and removing the bad parts. And so like one way to think about it is that when we are confessing, we are removing from our mind stream the misdeeds we have done, the feeling that we have done, the difficulty. We are removing that and separating ourselves from that. And so that by confessing, we then have the opportunity to feel that we are a new person, that we have a new hope, that we have taken a new step.
Nazar bena ne cancer poyo mina ta cancer posar bena ta chimba cancer poyo mina ta ko chimba cancer posha medi cancer posha medi se sha dumar ta yimine ta chimba cancer posa di ta cancer posa di kaso di sajar di ta disan shakjue ru chebi di ba dönshi Gyungi char pa seje, riche mo. Oda tena shinji cheje, kanda nga zu ji kashwe. Nam yune, ta nga chamlo liya di kashwe yawa sheba, ta kanda cheba koda di chawe le, ni yawa sheba ta geje chade yuwe sochi. Bena kashwe ji ko miji ge ta lega 상해 망고 제시기래 내가 도자 제시기래 내가 야고 제시기래 내가 도자 제부터 댄션에 에네 따가지 미리 도자를 해야지 따지 남배 최원의 삼담이미나 아니한테 따다를 때문에 없이 나는 균형 아주 삼도지 산다 가사도 카메라지 가다를 본 유몽배 시황도 교회 인주산 딱 카메라 지금 삼당当然就能去别人下的，别人没这个酒吧去开始虚伪呢，酒吧开呀嘛是，酒吧可能民国的选择可能这罗斯开呀嘛的，因为没现在这个大概培训了些，先给先往的酒吧就算，第一所下的呀了是，今年就算呢，他见着这个大看的，就是这个三东外的开始没事三东。
It's like if someone has cancer, like maybe they have bladder cancer or something. If someone has cancer, you can't just kill that person. But when there's the place that is affected by cancer, then these days what we can do is we can do an operation. You can remove the tumor. You can remove that. You can remove the problem. And so normally, what we have to do is we have to make a distinction. We usually don't distinguish between the person who does the act and the act they have done. It's quite possible that a person will have done many things that are both good and bad. It's possible that someone will have done many good things. It's possible that person will have done many bad things. And if we say that therefore that is a bad person, then in terms of the Dharma that doesn't really fit well, because that person is not at fault. They're under the control of the afflictions, and for that reason, the person is not at fault. It's like the example we always give. If someone is carrying a stick and beats something with it, the stick is not considered at fault. The stick has no wish to strike anyone else over the head, but the stick is under the control of someone else, the person who's carrying it. And so it's similar, that we are under the control of the afflictions. And so it's important that we remember this.
대래야 전에 참에 되면 나올래야 대내 가수에다 교바 지 가수에 계획 배대 간지샤는 사람 나세디고 콘 독송다 사지 리지 배샤는 교바 계획다지 시시도 선한다도 야나지 지 교바 기루도 배대 다 도구 배치하나 독공도 좀 배치 대 까담 리범 나래 되지 소유스래 가담 리범 나로래야 베테라고 제가 이 베트 쉬나 sometimes.
And so in the Aspiration for Rebirth and Sukhavati by Karma Chakme, there's an example or an analogy for how we should feel like, for how a regret should be. And it says, thinking about our past wrongs like poison that we have swallowed. This is talking about our regret, the level of regret we should have, or the manner in which we should develop the regret. And it should be like poison that we have swallowed. So this is this is an example that also comes from the texts of the Kadampa masters, and so I thought I'd speak about this example.
Tadi bedi unpleasant somewhere indicate about unpleasant somewhere. The bedi jigi kibu bedi takasu this. Bed dubudu jijesha. Tadi kadas na bena michuji yelserwa michugi nyamdo ane khalaji se michugi nyamdo khalaji se ne ta khaladi na lo la ya duye be chi che di gyun zen de ne ta michuye be indi sa dina minga ji na ne shi des ta minga ji na ne shi ta mi shi langma shi di 가르다 민가지 그것이 민가지 안에 가르다 시 나네 시 미시디다 칠라 두 번을 다 간다 지도 젠데야 다 미질하도 요이 인도산다 미치기 좀 다다 나요 알았어 류 대버치요 알았어 류 대버치요 레데 이나야 코셈라야 다 동해서나 다도 지그라치 오셔요 알았어 가라사 고사 사모님도 칼라데 세르와 저 땅아가 뒤시요 나서 그러지와 다지 꼴다도 나자다 요 말데 이면야 류 대버이나 다고 셈레야 아다 뭔데지네 왜 동해다 지그라가 내지 다디 두디 마때야 탑시베 칸타 지다 삼바르지다 대디 두디 마땡긴 임지 다 하지 수타 칸타 삼바르지 디지기 간다르 디지보마도 섬유메버지 아 디디르지 뭐랬어 데인주산 답배 되는 시도치다 겨바 길로도 단도랑 나르체베 디발라 답배지 가서다 지 대드비가 딱하다 지 도콘도 숨바다 위에 딱하다 겨바세나도 간다르 뭔가 디지기 겨바지 고레스
Actually, the comparison is really quite unpleasant. It's no fun. It's actually a rather nasty comparison. And so the story is there are 10 people who had a meal together, and there was some poison in the food. So among the 10 people who ate the meal together, 5 got sick and then died. There are 4 who get sick and are on the verge of dying. There's 1 remaining. That 1 remaining person has not yet got sick. That person is still healthy. But even though they're not sick, even though they're still healthy, in their mind there's a lot of suffering, there's a lot of fear in their mind. They're thinking everyone else has gotten sick and dying, and what's going to happen to me? I'm going to die. So even though they're not yet sick, even though they're still healthy, there's still a lot of suffering and terror in their mind. And they want to do everything they can to get the poison out of their system. They can only think about, what doctor should I go to, what hospital should I go to get rid of the poison. And so this is a comparison that shows, or an analogy that shows how it is that we should feel or develop regret. We should have this regret as if we have swallowed this poison and that we want to eliminate the poison.
다들이 인주산 다 너나 nga르체베 디발레베 요샤체베나 nga르체베 디바 페와다 데네 페웨기 유인체도 아래 다나지 치마 제 무퇴니 용하기 균형 초대한 체도요 드림이 균자를 때네 다 나르실 교심기 가셔다 나르실 교심기로 드리시래 다 친절해야 dom심 깨베입니다 근데 다 친절해 dom심 깨로데 지다다 친절해 dom심 깨야 돼야 되세 가르쳐야지 가시양 가서 디바 가시에 뽕 문유베데 람산 지 뽕 문유베데 야 용데야 다데 용데 예빈 되게들야지 지게 니마 찌라 뽕이 인사바로 다와 찌라 뽕이 유다 찌라 뽕이 인사바로 다나 다와 찌라 뽕이 인사바로 로 찌라 뽕이 인사바로 다 되게 가르쳐야 다 도나 domsim gebina yagu yaras mato dras ji bakar ji ka shama shamche ta dona ji susugi chodar chi a ji nimaji dundaji dawaji sa de de chi chevina nimaji le ya gali gali ji pont ya ji yongore su
And so if we regret the misdeeds we have done in the past, then they will not be able to grow and fester. They will not be able to increase. And then the future continuation of them or the completion of those acts will also be severed or also be cut. And so that is regretting the misdeeds we have done in the past. Then there is also the resolve, developing the resolve to refrain from them in the future. And so what sometimes happens is we have misdeeds, we recognize them as misdeeds, but we're unable to immediately give them up. This really does happen. And so when it's like this, then you have to try to see, can you give up that misdeed for a day? Can you give it up for a month? Can you give it up for a week? Are you able to give that misdeed up for a week, or able to give it up for a month or a year? And if you can develop the resolve to give it up for that period of time, that is very good. Because if you don't even bother trying to confess it, then it doesn't work. And so instead, if you make the resolve not to do it for a day, or not to do it for a week, not to do it for a month or for a year, and then eventually, someday, you will be able to give that up.
안 가르쳐야겠어. 다들 가시게 소나 근데 신지 동bar 켈라네 치 켈렌데다 게소나 니바 지금 더 미다베 띵도 준시에베게 다 가다 니바 중국에서 근데 용딩 거래. 다 이베이네야. 다 드리지 용딩 거래서.
Now here there is a doubt that happens. Sometimes you commit to giving it up in the future, but you're unable to give it up. So you've made the promise not to do something, and then later you're unable to keep that promise, and you break your commitment. So what happens then? There are some people who say that when you have committed to refrain from that bad deed, if in the future you break it, then not only do you have the wrong of not purifying that initial misdeed, you also have the additional wrong of lying. And so there are some people who say this.
다다 domsim kya ma jesa ni chu kha de 다다 domsim kya de digba da che do digba cha thab le ya domsim kya yo de jesa de san ka de san domsim ka da ji yin kha ma domsim kya da ma pa le ya khar cha re ma pa le ya and 양gar 니준들이 저번에 말했어야지. 대단히 그런 니주 카르지. 상동바한테 기준이었어.
So I think that here we have to make a distinction. Actually, it said we need to make the distinction. There is a difference between the resolve to refrain and then being able to refrain in the future. We need to distinguish these two. So when you have done something wrong and you are confessing it, if at that point you have the resolve, I'm never going to do this again, and it's a heartfelt resolve, then you have that resolve not to do it again. Whether or not you're able to keep do that in the future is a different situation.
단도나 급 텔레야 배 담네 나랑 초제기 마음바를 모두 치기 미삼으로 대삼시겠다 완전 돕습니다 고쳐요 자대야.
And so basically at that point if you say to yourself, I am going to refrain from this in the future, I shall never do this again, then at that point you have the wish to refrain from it, or the resolve to refrain.
배는 드링인데 좀 아주 좀 소알이야 자던 주산에 자통이 밀라나 야 선이 자통나 이 준시에 내가 가야 말았다. 저들이 드링데 자통이 밀라르만 선이 자통이 밀라는데 미제간 자통에 명이 참 계속해서 참 드링 주산 디규제 대대로지다가 디 준시에 내가 시라고 말았어.
Like for example, if someone offers you tea and you say, I'm not going to have any tea today. So you say you're not going to drink the tea today, but then tomorrow someone says, are you going to have tea? If at that point, if you have the tea, does that mean you lied yesterday? It doesn't. That's different. The day before you didn't drink. If you say you're not going to drink it one day, if that means you're not going to have tea for the rest of your life, that would be rather strange. And so for that reason, I think that there is no fault or no wrong of lying here.
다들의 인주산에 다 진짜가 도바체는 오 땅에 다 도무스 마시는 거를 마음발라 가수라다지 가수라다지 돔 토명 하고 말했어요. 코란 되게 삼다 되고라 약대 말했어. 그래서 급 뒤주산은 코란 경우에는 닌 타반에지 동아 삼다미는 그때 도바서만 마음발라다 야부 용도 말에 제가 땅아 domsum jiriminsan tati yagde maras tati 그 코란 디다디 가서 닝 타바네 급 디두산에 급 텔레야 domsum 지 초준데 그 삼바 지 오늘은 다 친이버서나 라도 닝 타바네 되지 마트에 다 지차다 마도야 마음발 제투고 말아서 되게 카다네 당아 domsum 지금 있어야 돼 야데 마ras.
And so there's a doubt that people have. Sometimes people think, I can't refrain from it in the future. I don't know if I'll be able to do that. I don't know if in the future I'll be able to do that. And so if we say, I'm not going to make the promise to resolve, then that's not good either. Because at that point, if you are able to make that commitment, that heartfelt commitment, to have that heartfelt resolve and intention, I'm never going to do it again, that is what is important. But if you think that, oh, I can't do this, I'm not going to be able to live up to it, I can't refrain from it, then that's not acceptable either. And so the reason is that it's a sign that at that point you aren't able to generate the authentic, the real intention, I'm going to give that up, that heartfelt thought, I'm going to refrain from this. And so I think that it indicates that you do not have that real heartfelt intention to give up in the future. So it is not good.
양 lumbu 뭐 충아 찌셔야 돼. 계셔디 가르쳐서나 다 개바셔야 돼. 급데 개바도 lumbu셔야 돼. 개바데 배자시에 마시 느끼자가 말했다. 다 간다르지 오늘은 내게 랑도르 제시해봐. 디바샤 샤라 개바여야 돼. 디바자 샤 신기 디주지 뚝시 창에 거는 디바샤 신기 디주기 그 디바 침부지 사요 이네. 그 디바디 양보창. 다 돕시 거는 돕시 창에 거는 디바 샤 미생기 디주 디바 춘주지 말아 사면은 그 디바 좀 잘. 그래서 디버사데 펜로르스 거 그러나 지 뒤도 섬을 받다지 그러나 디버사스도 남산 주스 마게나 다 니머르시야 지 펜에 체르체르 그래서 레스 거 레디 아주다지 나 펠체와사 레인두스탄 디준센데네 다 간다 아주지 케베 디버 체양 양 루비 디버 중요한 지스야데 조디 도시 참여권의 디바샤바 제시에 마시 되지.
And so for this reason it is sometimes said that even if the wise do a great misdeed, a fool's small misdeed is heavier. And so the reason for saying this is that if there's a wise person, and so a wise person here does not mean someone who necessarily knows all the texts. A wise person here means someone who knows what to do and what not to do, someone who knows how to confess misdeeds, someone who knows how to apply the 4 powers to confess the misdeeds. So if a wise person such as this does even a large misdeed, then in the end it will turn out that it'll be okay, it'll be all right. But if there is someone who does not know how to confess with the 4 powers, if there is a fool who does not know how to confess with the 4 powers, even if they do a small misdeed, it will get larger and larger. It will increase, and so the misdeed will increase and strengthen. Because they do not know how to confess the misdeed, eventually it'll grow larger and larger, and so it'll spread further and further. And so this is why it is said that a fool's small misdeed is weightier than a wise person's large misdeed. And so the point here is that we need to know how to confess our misdeeds with all 4 powers.
타게나 순샤베기다 교바기로 나바 숨나네 다 담보다 니바디 노디 슈쇼샤.
And so next, among the 3 different types of developing regret described in the ornament of the ornament of precious liberation, I would like to describe the first and second.
다 될래야. 간다스 라우다 아래 당한 디산 점을 돌려야다 드럽주고 쓰네 드럽주고 사는다 지 솔레 인더스트리 revelation 말다지 소제기 다 가르지 다 revolution 소제기 사제르지 소제기 사제스와 다 소라만 보지 총체 소제기 사제 총문에 손데 안간도 좋아 미지기 아니베 가르다 지 자주들라 아니베 취재다 체리의 취재가 capture 체제 당아주 로미 저기 자주 슈겐데 알리가 더 배지 치상 문자게다 슈체어르지 이쪽.
So in this world, ever since the Industrial Revolution in the 19th century, since the time there started to be many factories, the activities, the actions of humans have been supported by technology and science, and because of this, their effect has increased by tens or hundreds of thousands of times.
And then I sing on the drummy, the Kashwataji, with the materials of Chimwegi, that long dress and Chimwegi, Kanda Yageti, Shuchimushin, that Louis Devil to Chimre. That detail then a Takanda Mazugi, Takashwaji, Dangam summer, Chimwabulea Debe, Dangam, Isigata, greed some, that the Chuchers. That is the consumerism sedusan taji tadi byoge na zeju rinru swa zeju sa ta khanda par ji meba soya ba ji ka so ba beju tong ya on za dan ze 제버 제버스 자 강가로 배주 동안 강가로 다 가리나 봐 배주다 진짜기 가르쳐다 르루로 다르지도 정말에
Likewise, in the same time, for human beings, our enjoyment, our use of external things has grown and developed greatly. And at the same time, our greed for those external things has also increased greatly. So we are in a consumerist time. It is a time when we want to consume, when we want to use everything, and consumerism has really spread.
Cambiana ji bena dixie so cambiana nangche da dixie da da mangbu shiji da na ji moda da ji sa sanglo da ngone chene nga so su ya ge je lu ji da ngone goya da goya re mi do nga so shida zhe ma da sanglo le ya de ji be yin sa ti shuo le so ye ji de ji me na tap cha de ba de ji de de cha ji da gan da 강가로 된지 배주 동아로 지다 강가로 녀아다 배주 동아로 된지기 간다 미 강가로야 된지 다 간다 초아 다 된지기 다 내다 사버를 중도 아래
And so as consumerism has spread, it has become like the basic religion, the basic tradition, the religion of the entire world. And so we normally, we'd have so many different things in our houses. We have cars, and we rarely ask ourselves, do I really need this? We just don't ask ourselves that. It's like everyone else has these, and everyone else has the cars and the things, and we think to ourselves, oh, if I don't have one, then I'm really bad off, I'm poor. And so we don't really think about how much we're actually going to use them, and everyone gets them. And so this is our new lifestyle.
Guabas, Mune Gua Carredo. Debas San Mune Gua Minea Yankor, De Bewangi. De Bewang, De Deacho, and do Perdundo Sam. Mune Gua de Dan, De Bewangi, De Deatini, Yawachia, number Jia, Namju Dive, Chishindo Match, Duare. The Namju Chishindo Duare, T. Toilet and don't touch it. The Tawara in a TV in a Takawa Casa insan ta dinye pretty years love chapter pansi and Takada Choran digure de mena choran ta carso mimare sarocita digure de mena choran ta missing nimbu yamar sarocita ta canta digi hadu in a miganga yambasuji ta de chuna very chuna angazo cantaraji benjo mebre matoji Peshar Yuanada azu someone yoshanta Tapaji Benjo Pesha Madana Madam Tak Pesha Yuanada Pajing Azu Dino than Diminio Sayamata the Digi Kanda Chojini Tizang Karshotaji Tedege Gulam Damadula Denche Azugi mi ro mi ji ge sim gyu de ngam che che liang dong da ne xin gi da ge gong de xue ban nan xin gi number jie ge lo zhe zhe che xian do ba zhuo du zhe de yo.
So what happens is that our discernment, our intelligence that is able to distinguish what we need from what we want is growing weaker and weaker. The things that we need that are actually necessary for us, and the things that we want And they are due to our greed and our desires, we feel like we feel like, oh, I want this. And what's happening is that our ability to discern, our intelligence that can discriminate between our needs and our wants is growing weaker and weaker. And everywhere we go, on our phones, on our TVs, everywhere we go, we see advertisements say, buy this, get this, buy this. And we're made to feel like if we don't buy something, then we won't be human. And we feel like we have to have something. And this constant pressure is making us all as if we are crazy. It's really just a question of whether we have the resources or not. If we had the money, we'd buy everything. And so if we have the money, there's no question about it. We wouldn't even think about whether we would want to buy it or not. We'd just buy it. And so from one perspective, then what's happening is that because of our current ways of doing things, then our greeds are growing stronger and stronger. And yet, as I just mentioned, our ability to discern, to discriminate between what is necessary and what we need and what we want is growing weaker and weaker.
resource rangjung ta tenzu tele ya ko cishi yeba jen zoya yeba ji to cha de yare jesa den disan ciri bi xie ji sang a su ro mi ji gi ban de ngam de ba ka su ze ju ji pe ju shi dang de yin zang de gi ben zhen bu lin de de ngu zhu ji na dang sa ma de啊zhen bu lin de ngu zhu ji na dang sa ma de ji 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 da kan da kan da ge ji lu du xiong de yare jesa di gyun zhen de ne 가수에다 다 됐지.
So there's no limit where our desires will be satisfied, no end to our desires. But there is a limit to the resources that are available in the natural world, the resources of the natural environment. That has a limit. And so for that reason, scientists these days say that if we act upon all our desires and use resources, then even 5 or 6 earths would not be enough to satisfy our desires.
오늘 전에 지기 가서 지 아주 삼로 흘려를 당하지 오늘 전에 지 소소리야 지 가서 다른 윤지 송도와 팬바도 대화사 내가 무슨 팬바도 터도도 대화사 터도도 대화지 연구도나 내가 개변도 데트 려동 내가 개변 려 당하지 터도기 대화 디 가서 다지 주야를 아주 배주죠 내가 개변 좀 봤어 어다 드리지 내가 다 가다 삼로 띵 사보를 지다 삼로 흘려를 지 드리지 가서 동료요 제가 갑들이야 가서서 되면 버다 딱지 제거했어 삼로 흘려 땅에 아주 다다바도지 수수에게 딱 하나지 가서야지 노르주비아다 다나신기 자와다 민자외 된기시도 다 가다 이번 남았다 소시야 아래 뒤 제바도 문제 전에 제바데 제 룸으로 지다 제 외반으로 지다 제나 참바로 지는데 차이다 매 지수 삼로 방 따지 방제 다 계시 제 외반으로 지 많이 버체 다데 마외반으로 지는 다들어야 교습게 게 오래서 하든지 듣는 삼단 좀으로 섭다.
And so here when it talks about feeling regret for pointless misdeeds, if we look at our current lifestyle, then we need to look at it in a more relaxed way. It's like we often talk about benefit and happiness, and so benefit and happiness. The benefit means the temporary benefit. Happiness means the ultimate benefit. If we look at something and we see that it has ultimate benefit, then it's okay to sacrifice the temporary. If we look at something and see it brings ultimate happiness, then it is okay to sacrifice our temporary benefit for that. We should not just think about our temporary benefit. So for that reason, we have to look deeply within our minds. We have to look at things in a more relaxed way and see how they are. And we need to look at where things are meaningful. That means we need to look at things in a more relaxed manner. Instead of just thinking about gathering money, about gathering wealth, we've done many misdeeds in order to gather wealth. We've done misdeeds for the sake of those we dislike and for the sake of those we like. And we need to think carefully about, were those worthy of being done? Was it right to do it? Was it appropriate to act like that or not? We need to think about this. And if those acts were not worthy of being done, then we should feel regret for them. Now, the second of the methods of developing remorse is said by considering fear. So considering fear, here what it is described in the text of the Ornament of Precious Realization is that there is the fear of dying. There is the fear of actual death, of what happens after the time of death. And then there is the fear of what happens subsequent to death. This means like falling into the 3 lower realms and so forth, and the fear of that. So this is what is described in the text of the Ornament of Ornament of Precious Liberation. And so the reasons why we need to consider the fear is that fear happens to us. And actually there are for many people who have so much fear and so much terror, so much fright in their lives that it creates many difficulties for them. There are many people who come to me and say, I feel such fear, such terror, and I need something to help me. I need something to fix this. But here, when we're talking about fear, this means a different level of fear. It's not the level of fear that we normally fear. Here, we need to think about fear on a deeper and more profound level.
아주 지그라기요. 다 예배이네야. 아주 지기 드네 인주스탄에 벤튼 응연대 셰시.
So here, the fear that we're talking about is not the normal sort of feelings of fright or fear that we think about. This is fear that comes from contemplating and examining things, from understanding. It's like within our brains. It's like until something is right in front of us, only then do we actually feel any fear about it. If we just think, oh, maybe it's going to happen in the future, we don't really feel frightened about that. It's like only when the tiger is about to jump on you, when the tiger is jumping on you, only at that point do you actually panic and feel terror. If someone says to you, a tiger is going to attack you, you better be careful. Watch what the tiger is coming. The tiger is going to attack you in a month. You aren't going to feel much fear. It's not until the point that the terror is immediately upon you that you actually feel the fear. And so that's the way it is with our brains. Until that fearful situation suddenly occurs, until that point, we do not feel fear.
다 이내야. 다 페나티사 쿠르기 니즈를 차샤위미나. 다 쿠르래 유도 침을 줘도 알아. 다 이나 쿠르는 유도 침을 줘야 버디. 다 꾸란 유도디 야심부 시비지미 이상 아주 람상 쿠르는 유도 침을 침비 집어들 람상 아주 소르도. 제가 디 소르는 도 인도자 디기지 아주 다지 시나로 요하다. 이 천나로 요한테 람살로用过来다 예비네야 다지 가수에 디균셀 때는 아주 지 균센 상다지这个团呢가당 원에서 야부지 용면도 아주로 다지 간다지 수수수수리야 다지 수수 순급 제거사래 다 순급 제거사래 년가 도사지기다 인지게도 말씀 시그널 세나다 되지 다지 아주 땅토 다들 가라상 아주는 유 지다데 루루 동안 한도인 지다만 답에 지 오늘은 딱제 셔네 근데 이제 띵삼묘기 지부를 때 같이 연구해야지 아주 싫어 셔도
It's like if we think about with the situation in the environment. In the environment, there are great changes in the climate. But these changes are so vast and so huge that we are unable to feel and unable to actually feel the changes. Because we're unable to feel them, then we don't feel like there's an immediate danger or an immediate fear of them. And the reason for that, for that reason, we need to think about how this change is not good. These are not good. We need to think about the dangers that are coming to ourselves. But this doesn't create there's no signal to us to feel the fear. And the reason for this is that fear in our minds comes when there's a sudden, frightening situation that occurs. And we aren't able, we don't develop the fear about those that comes from thinking or examining on a more deep and profound level.
제가 디지 awareness는 장도 디지기에 나가나 아줄이야 지 전시에도디 디지리 제가 그 집어 제리아 디지 다 가서 전시 띵 상으로 이게 매매 있다. 한테 가도 디지 인가요? 벤 점블링 토리아 draw music 다 가서지 뉴스쟁이 다 간다 집어 먹고 영화네. 그러지 가서다 배나 내양게 집어들이 어디 알아? 다가는 신다 잘라서 집어 먹고요. 배는지 나는 용아주 말레리아다 디졸이야 word killers 알지. 저물리기 셰마사. 저물리기 셰마스 미싱에서 걸어봐. 저물리기 셰마스 들으스 거래. 디나는 식대 가라사나. 알아서야. 로미 핀수 찍지리야. 지 승구르면 제선면. 다디 저물리기 셰마지레서. 그래서나 계시가 저불리기 미편신 제심 또지 야부를 쉬어이미나 안 미들어서 망고 장부터서 망고 안 다나지 겸면 그 미들어서 망고지 딱간다 그런듯이 가서 시과 동해양과 시과 저거 이랑 아주 편중이 제심데 총차와 인도산 데이터 강림하고 체대야. 저거 제사 제세면 코랑 ene kaso zubli shema chi chi du su zi chi ga ta zese me ba sa de ninga sa ba de ba ta zese me ba kali ji ngaran so e su su ni ne ji kali 학원 되고 me ba ya kali ji mi zese me ba ji ni ji da me de ge za wa shi da me de ge ji de ji cha ninga do ta ina ti mi se ga ta kaso de ji 지거들 뒤지 현안 사업을 해서 삼로지 땅나 마도 삼로 마다나 고 현안 사업을 해서 윤들이야 현안 사업을 게 통해서 게 말로 삼로지 땅이나 아니 직접은 매버사디 현안 사업 그러지매 니 집에서 현안 사업 그러지매 다디 현안 철로디 삼로 땅나 마도 현토야 매된 게 있을 수 있는데 내주산 뒤주산들 검들은 집어서디 어디 되지 삼로 땅 지 진짜 다 가서 다지 당문에 중교 제공도 다 년간도 사지 근데 다지 소소리야 가다라 땅과야 돼 계속 차려 알았어
So we lack awareness. We lack the mindfulness and awareness that of the dangers that we face. And so for that reason, in this world, there are many different dangers and destructions that people face. Some of these are like the dangers or the disasters that come about because of epidemics. Like some people say these days that malaria is one of the world #1 killers, or is like the butcher of the world. But also, when people lack affection for each other, when they lack respect for each other, this is also a real killer in the world. And the reason for that is that if we had affection for each other, then we would do something about all the desperate, all the unfortunate people without protectors. We would do something to protect and help them. But because we lack that affection, if we lack that affection, then it really becomes the killer in the world, lacking the affection and lacking compassion. That lack of affection and compassion becomes a great danger to the world. And this gives us many difficulties but it's difficult because it's something that we don't really know. It's unknown, it's stealthy, and we don't really realize that we lack compassion and we lack affection. It's only when we really, when something terrifying, when we come face to face with something terrifying that we feel fear about it. And if we don't actually see it before us, we do not feel the fear. And so, for that reason, if we don't think about the danger of lacking affection, the lacking compassion, if we don't consider and think about it, we don't really see how dangerous it actually is. And so when we talk about fear here, this means that we need to talk about the actual looking within our mind to see what actually is going to give us difficulties and problems, in order that we'll be able to give ourselves a signal that we should be afraid of it. We've been talking about so many scary things, it's probably best to tell a scary story. Actually, there are people who say, "Oh, I can't really talk about the Dharma, but I can tell stories." But now I'm not even sure if we can tell stories. So, if you can't tell stories, you can't even talk about the Dharma, then that would be a difficult situation. At any case, I'll try to tell you a scary story. This is a story about Akutemba. I'm known for being good at telling stories about Akutemba. I'm known for being good at telling stories about Akutempa, but I've never told one before.
어우던 버사디 가시에서나 바보를 위지 그 로마 내줄 추용사죠. 대 어우던 버는들 남년들도 다들 공농시다요나 가세나 하고메 내줄 추용사죠. 대 어우던 버사디 내줄 추용사다 어우던 버스. 대신에들 알랍스.
Now, actually, Akutempa, sometimes it's said that he is a student of that he was a student of Gampopa's named the Yogi Chuyung. So whether there's a source for this, I don't know. But here, sometimes it is said that the Yogi Chuyung was Akutempa.
The characteristics of one of the character.
At any rate, whoever Akutumba was, he is known as being someone who protected and supported the weak, and who harmed or obstructed the powerful. And so that is basically the type of character that he had.
That is Sharansa doing the Karasana. Tizela and Chubujaras, Chubu de Mizan, that Chubujavi in Dusana, that Chubu de Zambatonga Chivares. Zambatonga to Dusana, oh, the Hakwane. Korambe, the Chubu de Yanabe, Zambatonga Chirachis, Zambatonga to Ila.
And so the scary story is that one time there was a rich person, a person from a rich household, and this person went to go sell some tsampa. And Akutumba heard about this and said to the rich person, I'm going to come along too. I'm also going to sell some tsampa.
In a old bango in Zam, Zamba use Mara. Nidizana, Zamba, Tobe Chimbuji, Tobe Stat, Gemosan, as we Gemosata. Gemokan, that Zamba Lucian, that Gemot, Sama Tella Luch. They call it Kanja Switch. And they could need Zamba from Chimbers.
The problem is that Akutumpa was poor, so he didn't have any tsampa to sell. So what he did is he took a bushel bag. In this bushel bag, he filled it mostly with sand, and then he put a little bit of tsampa on the top and went off to sell tsampa.
Takuni Langal Chin Tamara Dusana Kuni and a Kalesh which catch. And that Gombarji Nalolea, Gombani Baji, Nalolea, and Kuni Kasre, Niesu Kepsi, Sanam, Gombaji, Salia, and Gombaji Nalo, Duani Baruchi Nalo, Gombashita Takomegi, Tina Lolea, and Niesu Kepsi, Devres.
And so they were traveling, and as they were traveling, they got really tired. They came to this old monastery, and they decided to stop there and rest for the night. And so they stayed in this old temple where there really wasn't anyone taking care of it. So the rich person was fat, and so because he was so fat, as soon as they stopped to rest, he immediately fell asleep. And so after the rich guy fell asleep, then Akutumpa took his bag and he traded the rich person's tsampa for his own sand and filled his own bag with the rich person's tsampa. Then he took some of his tsampa and he smeared it on the mouth of a Chenrezig statue in the middle of the shrine. And then he lay next to the lay near the rich guy, pretending to sleep.
다 산이 죽고도 야래 야랑 그 장바 통하면 뭐라 그 장바 통하면 됐어 어우다 장바 통하면 됐어 장바 그만 장바 니 장바 되면 될라
And so the rich person woke up the next morning and he started looking for his tsampa. And he said, "Where's my tsampa?" He said, "Akutumba, where's my tsampa? Something's happened to my tsampa."
니 세도도 다 장바 가야 나서 고라니 장바 차치라 장바 친디사 어디 아 추고 야채 마스 친 타마르 어디 다 빼산도 스타 그 장바데 제레스 구마겸
So Akutumba got up and he pretended to look around. They looked everywhere and they're looking back and forth. And then finally, after they'd been looking, then Akutumba said, "Ah, we're finished. Chenrezik stole all of your tsampa."
이 추고데 이만 제레스 간데 장바 구마겸 야뜨어라 제레스기 셰데 장바 거려와
The rich person said, "That can't be. Chenrezik couldn't have stolen the tsampa." But then they looked up and all around the mouth of the Chenrezik there was tsampa.
된 추고데 제레스 셰데 다 할래 먹고 삼베 구마고 제레스기 장방 감스 구마고 말에 삼바데 구마 규스도 스타 제레스기 장방 감스도
And so the rich person looked up and he was just surprised, like, the person I thought I'd never steal tsampa stole the tsampa.
다디 샤난 사회기 돈데 데이 말에 다디 인두스탄 다디 제레스기 장바 구마자베 샤난 사회
So that's the scary story. The scary story is that your tsampa, you're in danger of losing your tsampa to Chenrezik stealing it.